Have you noticed that even though everyone keeps saying inflation is coming down, your grocery bill hasn't? You're not imagining it. Your food is more expensive than ever, and for a lot of families, it's becoming the biggest monthly stress point. In this video, we're going way past the headlines and digging into the real reasons your groceries are still so expensive, from tariffs and weather to corporate strategy and quiet changes in the food system that most people never see. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll not only understand what's going on, you'll also know how to push back and protect yourself at the checkout. Let's get into it. First, we need to clear up one big confusion. Inflation going down does not mean prices go back to normal. Think of it like this. If your groceries went up 20% over a couple of years, and then inflation slows to 2%, that just means they're now going up more slowly. You're stuck on a higher floor. The elevator stopped rising so fast, but it never came back down. Since the pandemic, food prices in the US have climbed dramatically, roughly on the order of a third more than they were before. That's why your usual cart feels completely different now. You're paying more and often getting less. And here's the key. A lot of the forces that pushed prices up never fully went away. They just stopped being front-page news. So let's break those forces down, one by one. A big chunk of what you buy in the grocery store doesn't come from down the road. It comes from all over the world. That means trade policy, the tariffs and fees countries slap on each other's products, matters a lot more to your grocery bill than you might think. Over the past few years, the US has used broad tariffs on a range of imports, including things like steel and aluminum, which are used to make cans and packaging, and even food items themselves, like coffee and certain fruits. Tariffs are basically taxes on imports, and those costs don't just vanish. They get passed along the chain. Importers pay more to bring products in. Manufacturers pay more for packaging. Retailers pay more to stock their shelves. And at the very end of that line is you at the register. This is one of the quiet reasons your canned vegetables, your coffee, and a lot of shelf-stable products have stayed surprisingly expensive, even when other parts of the economy seem to be calming down. Next, let's talk about something nobody can negotiate with: the weather. When you hear about droughts, floods, or strange weather patterns, it might sound abstract, something happening somewhere else. But in the food system, those events have long tails. Droughts in major cattle regions, for example, have hit pastures and feed supplies hard. When it becomes too expensive to feed animals, many ranchers cut their herds, even selling off breeding cows. That doesn't show up in your grocery store immediately. It shows up months or years later, when there are fewer animals coming to market and beef prices climb. The same thing happens with crops. Bad weather in key growing regions, whether that's heat, frost, or too much rain, can push up the price of fruits, vegetables, and grains for a long time because the entire supply shrinks. Then add in disease events like bird flu, which have repeatedly hit poultry and egg producers. When millions of birds have to be culled to stop an outbreak, the supply of eggs and chicken drops, and prices jump. The bigger pattern here is that the climate is getting more volatile, and the food system is feeling it. Every time there's a shock, it ripples through the supply chain and gives prices another push upward, and they rarely drop back to where they started. Remember the early pandemic days: empty shelves, shipping delays, container ships waiting off ports for weeks? That chaos exposed just how fragile the food system really is. To keep food moving, companies had to make a lot of changes fast. Higher wages and bonuses to attract workers, investments in safety, sanitation, and protective equipment, rerouted supply chains, and more expensive shipping options, backup suppliers, and more inventory. At first, a lot of these were called temporary costs. But here's the thing: many of them became permanent. Labor is still tight in trucking, warehousing, and food processing. Companies are still paying more for transportation, for safety, for storage, and instead of resetting prices once the initial crisis passed, they baked those higher costs into their business models. So even when you no longer see empty shelves, you're still paying for the system upgrades in the background. The pandemic didn't just spike prices, it ratcheted them up to a new baseline. Now think about how far each item in your cart has traveled. Most food doesn't go farm to store. It goes farm to processor, to warehouse, to distribution center, to store, sometimes with extra steps in between. Every step requires fuel for trucks and ships, refrigeration to keep things cold, and energy for storage, lighting, and processing. When diesel prices rise, when electricity is more expensive, or when logistics get snarled, all of that filters into the cost of food. In recent years, fuel and energy costs have been a recurring problem. Even when they come down a bit, companies are reluctant to quickly cut prices because they've already trained customers to accept the higher numbers on the shelf. So the journey of your food, all those invisible miles, is a big part of why that bag of lettuce or box of frozen pizza costs what it does. Let's zoom in even further to the ingredients and packaging. Farmers rely on things like fertilizer, seed, fuel, and equipment. Manufacturers rely on metals, plastics, cardboard, and glass. Over the last few years, the costs of these inputs have swung wildly, and in many cases settled higher than before. When fertilizer and feed are expensive, raw food products cost more. When steel and aluminum are more expensive, cans cost more. When cardboard and plastic go up, it costs more to box and wrap your food. Instead of eating those costs, most companies have done two things: raised prices outright and quietly shrunk the product. This is where shrinkflation comes in. Maybe your cereal box looks the same, but there's less inside. Your chips bag has more air than you remember. Your yogurt got smaller by a couple of ounces. On paper, it lets companies say, "We didn't raise the price that much." But in reality, you're paying more per ounce, per serving, per bite. So even if the sticker price is only up a little, the value you get for that price has gone down. Up to now, we've talked about costs, all the things that legitimately got more expensive. But there's another piece to this story that makes people angry: pricing power. In many parts of the food industry, a small number of giant companies dominate entire categories. A few corporations control most of the beef processing. A handful dominate snack foods, cereals, sodas, and packaged meals. Even many different brands on the shelf often roll up to the same parent company. When you have that much market concentration, companies have more room to raise prices without losing customers, especially on items that feel like necessities or long-time household staples. During and after the pandemic, a pattern emerged. Costs went up, companies raised prices more than enough to cover those costs, and profits, in many cases, hit record highs. Once shoppers got used to higher prices in a chaotic environment, with everyone blaming inflation, it became much easier to keep those prices elevated, even when certain input costs started to ease. In other words, part of the reason your groceries are still so expensive isn't just higher costs. It's that the big players discovered where the ceiling really is on what people will pay, and they're not eager to bring that ceiling back down. There's also a basic economic truth at work: food is not optional. Even when prices rise, most households keep buying groceries. They might switch from name brands to store brands, buy less meat, or skip treats, but they still show up at the store every week. From a company's perspective, that steady demand is a signal. People hate this, but they're still paying it. So prices stick. This is why you don't see dramatic price drops, even when some of the original reasons for an increase fade away. Once the new price is normal, there's less pressure to cut it. Instead, companies might offer more loyalty promotions or targeted discounts, which feel like a deal without changing the official shelf price. Our habits, the fact that we treat groceries as non-negotiable, give the system room to keep prices high. So what does all of this look like in real life? For many families, the grocery budget has gone from manageable to the thing that constantly breaks the month. Parents are stretching meals, buying fewer fresh items, cutting back on meat, and leaning on cheaper, more processed foods just to make the math work. Some people split their shopping between multiple stores to chase sales. Others are relying more on discount chains, dollar stores, or bulk clubs. And for lower-income households, the trade-offs can be brutal. Groceries versus gas, groceries versus medication, groceries versus rent. When nearly half the country says it's harder to afford food than it was just a couple of years ago, it's not a personal failure. It's a structural problem. The system has quietly reset what normal looks like, and a lot of people are being left behind by that reset. We can't fix tariffs or global weather from our own kitchens, but we're not totally powerless either. Here are some concrete ways to fight back. First, know your anchor prices. Pick 10 to 15 things you buy all the time: milk, eggs, chicken, rice, a few snacks, and memorize the per unit prices when they're a good deal. That way, you can quickly see when something is genuinely on sale versus just pretending to be. Second, compare unit prices, not shelf prices. Always look at the price per ounce, per pound, or per count. That's how you expose shrinkflation and catch packages that got smaller but stayed the same price. Third, be strategic with brands. Store brands are often made in the same factories as big brands, especially for basics like canned goods, sugar, flour, and dairy. Try swapping a few key items and see where you truly notice a difference. Fourth, plan around what's actually cheap. Instead of planning meals and then shopping, flip it. See what's on a real sale or in season and build your meals around that. Chicken thighs instead of breasts. In-season produce instead of expensive out-of-season imports. Fifth, use your freezer as a savings tool. When staples hit a genuinely low price, buy extra and freeze. Proteins, bread, certain fruits and veggies. You're basically creating your own little hedge against future price spikes. Sixth, vote with your wallet and your voice. When you see outrageous pricing or sneaky shrinkflation, talk about it. Post it, share it, send an email to the company. Individually, it feels small, but collectively, that pressure shapes what companies think they can get away with. These strategies won't fix the system, but they can help you take back a bit of control in a situation that often feels completely out of your hands. So the real reason groceries are still so expensive isn't just inflation. It's a mix of long-lasting shocks, higher structural costs, trade policies, climate and disease pressures, and, let's be honest, companies realizing how far they can push prices when the world is distracted. If this video helped you understand what's really going on with your grocery bill, do me a favor. Hit that like button so more people see it. Subscribe if you want more deep dives on money, cost of living, and how the economy actually touches your life. And in the comments, tell me, what's one item that has shocked you the most with its new price? Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.